Agency leaders tell me deploying AI solutions they've tested through use cases is the next stage of AI. After that comes deploying at scale broadly across agencies and training teams to use the tools. Bryan Castle is Director of Software Engineering for aiSSEMBLE at Booz Allen. Booz Allen sponsors this edition of FedGov Today. Bryan, welcome. It's great to talk to you. How are you seeing agencies as they've kind of started to wrap their arms around the use case concept with artificial intelligence, getting into the scaling and getting into the maturation process, not just of using the technology itself, but of building their teams of humans that are going to use these tools as well? Welcome.
Hey, thank you, Francis, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here talking to you today. Everyone's trying to adopt AI right now in some form or fashion. And so through over 150 projects where we're doing this today, we get the pleasure of delivering with our clients, but also getting to see some of the challenges that they face in the day-to-day. And so, what we really see is a spectrum across the organizations, right? There's some organizations that are just starting small, doing research, development, just trying to understand the basics of what AI can do. And then there's other organizations that are standing up large centralized AI functions that are going to span their entire organizations. And so we really see all of those different use cases. As we talk about the workforce that's going to be required to deliver these, it's really the way Booz Allen thinks about this is it's really going to be a multidisciplinary workforce that's required to successfully deliver AI, particularly at scale. I sometimes use the analogy that when we're developing a vaccine in a lab, we need a scientist that's using a particular set of tools, techniques, and they're going to do some experimentation. And then once they find the vaccine, we want to scale that to 100 million people worldwide. That's a whole different set of skills, techniques, and people to do. And so we need to realize the same is true in AI, right? We need the scientific discovery of what the data scientists are discovering, and it's amazing stuff. But then we also need to put that through an engineering process to put rigor into it so that way it can really scale to meet the needs of our organizations.
Are there common threads among the organizations that are having early successes, Bryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we see is that people want to start small, but then they want to grow that really fast, right? Once they get an initial success. I think one of the things that's probably most common for the successful adoptions of AI are folks that are injecting, rigor in from the beginning, right? So that makes it easier to then transition that into operations and scale it over time. So I think that's one thing. I also think that we need to have realistic use cases. There's a lot of information out there around AI, and we all have eyes and ears, and we all watch movies and read newspapers. So we're all consuming this information, and so we see lots of things that go from the basic to the science fiction. And so I think what we always need to do is be sure that we're focusing on realistic use cases, because sometimes when we get too wrapped up in the science fiction of things, and the expectations get out of whack. And then I would say the last thing is, access to high quality data. As we're doing AI, right, access to high quality data is one of the biggest challenges that we see over and over again, and often where we're spending a lot of time is hoping to curate that data. So, getting access to that, being able to curate it, making it ready for training our AI algorithms. Organizations that already have maturity in those spaces are going to be a leg up because they don't have to focus on those aspects out of the gate.
You talked about the fact that some organizations, and these are my characterizations, so if I didn't get it quite right, please set me straight. But it sounded like the way that you were, the observations that you've seen, is that there are some organizations that are doing it at kind of a grassroots level, really small shoots, and then letting them grow, and others that are applying an enterprise-wide framework. Is one of those approaches working better than the other, or is it more the way that the organizations do the implementation and the execution that determines the level of success that they have?
Yeah, I think it's very organization dependent. And I don't think that there's a one size fits all to this. And we need to let each organization identify sort of that Goldilocks zone of what works best for them, right? I think sometimes when we try to make a one size fits all solution, it doesn't adapt to an individual organization's unique needs. And I think we need to realize that, when we look across the federal government, like the needs of, a researcher at, say, NIH are going to be different than the needs of a person developing algorithms for the Department of Defense that are going to be different that somebody who's working in our national security sector. And so I think when we look across those, I don't view them as being right or wrong. I think we just need to right size the approach for what the organization's looking to accomplish.
Bryan, something that's top of mind for a lot of people in information technology and government now broadly, not specifically related to AI, is open source. How do you address concerns about open source or inquiries about open source, so on, when government partners come to you and say, this is something that's on our mind?
So, AISSEMBLE, which is Booz Allen's framework for building AI solutions, is an open source framework. It's the foundational toolkit that we use for data processing, building training models or MLOps, and then ultimately for the secure operational deployment of those models into production. So it's our foundational software integration toolkit that we use for building ML and AI solutions. And so, we made that open source in May, specifically to address, a few things. We want to build enduring solutions for our clients. They want to have solutions that are not tied just to Booz Allen. They want to have solutions that are going to, provide significant mission impact now and into the future. And so one of the ways we wanted to assure them that we were going to be able to do that with AISSEMBLE was by making it open source. So that way they can continue to leverage AISSEMBLE-based solutions, even without Booz Allen. And so that's one way that we can really help our government clients understand our commitment to their mission and our belief that open source software helps provide them with enduring solutions that are not locked into any specific vendor or service provider.
What's the long-term gain that they will get beyond just the short-term gain of not being locked into one particular vendor, though, based on being able to access that technology?
The long-term gain is that we can future-proof some of the solutions that we're developing. This is a rapidly evolving space. If you look at the solution providers and the tooling that's out there from 5 years ago to where it is today, the scatter plot of solutions is just mind-blowing. And there's new tools and techniques coming online every day. And so by aligning to open source and by developing things using open architectures, we can actually start to make our solutions pluggable. And so that way we can take advantage of the best things that we have available to us today, but then also future-proof our solutions. So that way we can take advantage of the new innovations of tomorrow. And that's one of the things that AISSEMBLE really strives to provide is that open architecture and the open source underpinnings. So that way we can really make pluggable solutions over time that are going to endure and provide mission outcomes into the future.
What prep work is it helpful for agencies to do when they get to that phase, Bryan?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what is important to realize is that this is a multidisciplinary effort. So it's not just one person. You don't just need a data engineer. You don't just need a machine learning engineer or a data scientist or a software engineer or a DevOps engineer. The reality is we need all of those skill sets in order to bring to bear these kinds of enterprise grade solutions that we're going to need. And so we need to be able to have those teams work together and collaborate. So that way we can really, provide the business value that our stakeholders need in sort of a secure and appropriate way for our government clients.
So you've used the word multidisciplinary a couple of times in this conversation. What are the areas where you've seen, as you've worked with your government partners, where have they had the biggest gap between what would be good for them to have and what they
Yeah.
actually have skills-wise?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things that we see, the biggest challenges that we see organizations face is operationalizing AI, transitioning from small experiments into something that's actually enterprise class. And so we view that as the biggest gap. Some of the vertically integrated AI platforms that are out there make it easy for you to transition lightweight code and start to put it into production, but it often bypasses many of the traditional software engineering processes and techniques that we use, such as large amounts of testing. How do we package this in a consistent way so that way it can be deployed repeatedly over and over again? And so I think transitioning those small experiments is probably one of the biggest challenges our clients face. There's lots of names for it. They call it prototype purgatory or the valley of death, right? But the fundamental challenge is that, we have something that was a prototype. It showed a lot of promise, but we didn't build in all of the abilities, the scalability, the security, the repeatability, all of those things. We were very focused on just, kind of a proof of concept capability. And so I think, operationalizing involves much more than just how do I, push a piece of code. We also need to put a lot of structure around it.
Bryan, it's a great conversation. I'm grateful for you joining me, and I appreciate your insight today. Thanks very much.
Hey, thanks so much for having me today, Francis. Appreciate it.
You can read more about AISSEMBLE in today's show notes at fedgovtoday.com.